Hi, everybody. Zach here. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really grateful you're here, and I'm really grateful I have the opportunity to serve you today. On today's episode, it's titled, Why Do I Do What I Do, Even If I Don't Want to? And I think this is huge when it comes to addictions and recovery more specifically, because that's the question. Why do I keep doing this thing that I don't want to keep doing? And there might be times where it feels like it's easier to say no, and then other times where no isn't even an option. And what is that? Why is that? Why is it harder for some people to say no to drugs or the experience or, gambling or whatever it may be that your addiction is? And then for other people, it's just an easy, and they say, oh, it's will or it's this and that. And I think I've covered. I'm telling you, it's not willpower. It has nothing to do with it. Today, we're going to talk about what it is actually that is driving you. What is driving the behavior of the drug use itself, or if it's not drug use, it's, gambling or enter whatever your addiction is here. It does not matter. All addictions are tools serving one purpose: the removal of pain, the regulation of pain. So until we deal with the initial wound or the initial pain, the mind's going to continue to produce thoughts to reach for those experiences like drugs or alcohol or, gambling or whatever it may be in order to soothe or regulate. And so let's talk about recovery itself. The process of recovery is, so when I think about in one word, what is addiction, it's separation. And one word, what is recovery, it's connection. So we're reconnecting with ourself. And that may sound weird or obscure or just off, but bear with me because you are multifaceted and there are numerous aspects of you that make up the entirety of who you are. And the part of you that I'm speaking to that requires the addiction as a strategy to survive, that part of you is wounded and needs help. And the addiction is merely the only strategy it knows to receive that help. So, why is it that I keep doing what I don't want to do, even if I know it's not serving me? And the answer is because somewhere along the line, it did serve you. It did provide safety, and it did allow you to survive that moment. Was it good in all the moments of your life? No, but in that moment, it allowed you to survive. And so it's no wonder that the mind will brilliantly come up with those same survival strategies that worked in the past to try to use again in the future. Now, when I think of recovering, a part of you still believes it needs this addiction to survive or these drugs to survive. So, what is that part of you? Well, in short, it's your nervous system. So, we are wired for survival, and that's what our nervous system is. It is our innate and natural ability to protect ourselves, both consciously and subconsciously. And the subconscious ones are just the patterns that we ran so many times consciously that they now become ingrained and they're automatic and they happen subconsciously. Doesn't mean they're what's best for us. Could have been then, but maybe not so much now. But either way, they were just a strategy. And that's all addictions are. They're strategies. They are a way in which we were able to produce safety within ourselves. So let's talk about strategies so that we can kind of get a better understanding, because your addiction is an adaptive survival strategy. So let's think of other adaptations. So let's first talk about what is a survival strategy itself. And in nature, there are many different adaptations that allowed the organism to then survive. And sometimes it was a behavioral adaptation, or sometimes it was a structural adaptation. Structural being their anatomy, and behavioral being how they act. So, like a structural adaptation in nature could be how a chameleon or lizards or frogs blend into their environment, or even moths on bark. So that's an adaptation of a survival strategy. The moths weren't initially, didn't have wings that blended to bark. Those colors, that pigmentation was adapted as a survival strategy. How does it help them survive? Well, it blends them in so that their prey aren't as easily seen by prey. So this is an adaptive survival strategy. Now I think of like a behavioral one. And the first one that comes to mind is birds. I think of how they migrate from one location to another to find better conditions for survival. And so adaptations in nature are everywhere and constantly occurring. And they're not bad. You wouldn't say the moth is bad. You wouldn't say, monarch butterflies are bad for traveling all across the country. It's just an adaptation in order to survive. That's what your addiction was as well, an adaptation in order to survive. It's no longer helping you survive. It's probably most likely bringing you down now. But the good news is we can reverse all of that. So what's important is first to gain an awareness of what's going on so that you can actually begin to do that. So let's think of, adaptation. It's an adaptive survival strategy. So let's think of, and I would say that your addiction is now an obsolete adaptive survival strategy, meaning that it once served you, but it no longer does. An example of this would be like a horse and buggy. Horse and buggy served people for the longest time and made life a lot easier. It was necessary for survival. And then cars came along. Now, nobody uses horse and buggy to get along because cars are now necessary for survival. So, are we going to go around beating up all the horses and buggies? No. So stop beating up yourself. It's just a strategy that once served you that no longer does. And we can get rid of it. We can rise above it. We can train the mind to use a different tool or a different strategy that does serve us now. And as soon as you do that, the mind is not trying to screw you over. As soon as it realizes and accepts a new tool to provide that safety and to remove that pain, then it's going to come up with thoughts to use that tool instead. And so it was actually really comforting for me in the recovery process, because when I got better at these tools and understanding myself and learning how to love myself, the more my body wanted that for me as well. And I'm telling you, it's just like that person on the side of the street that's injured and you come over and start helping. They're going to be really considerate and kind and loving to you for helping them. And that's the same is to be said is true of the part of you that you've separated yourself from through your addiction. When you come back to that part of you, when you come back to it and you start to love it and give it the support that it needs and meet its needs, then it's going to get really, really excited about that. And it's going to feel good. And guess what, friends? That's you. That's you and your feeling that you will receive. In other words, through most of my recovery, I felt good. And I felt good because, not because I wasn't using drugs and, oh, look at me. Yeah, I'm being a good boy. I felt good emotionally and physically and biologically because I was no longer, my strategy was no longer obsolete. It was useful. And then the sooner you teach your nervous system useful strategies, the sooner it will repeat the desire to continue to use them. Another obsolete strategy. You remember when we all used to use paper maps? I remember, like, if you wanted, it was right when I was 16. So I started driving, and then it was the end of the map era. And it was still like, if I didn't have a map in my car whenever I was learning to drive, then it was a very big problem. Like, that was a necessary component, because if you got lost, you didn't know how to get anywhere. The only way you get anywhere is if you had a map. I mean, you could pull over into the gas station and go ask the guy, hey, how do you get to so-and-so? Or do you know where so-and-so is? And then came GPS and phones. And as soon as phones came out and GPS came out, I can't remember the last time I used a map. So those are some good examples of some strategies in nature. Let's talk a little bit about some adaptations that you and I may, well, let's talk about the ones I've made. And the ones that I made based off of my needs not being met, or a pain, or a wound, or a trauma. And so these are all some of these adaptations, or my adaptations that I had. And I'm going to give you 4 of them. And I'll just give you kind of a short example of what those were actually trying to accomplish. And again, survival strategies are just, they're intelligent. They are beautiful. They're helpful. And if we see them for what they truly are at their state and their initial creation, then it's a lot easier to let go of them. In other words, if I see that my people-pleasing was an attempt to maintain a connection with others, then it's a lot easier for me to stop pleasing everybody, because I realize that that's just me reaching out for connection. Well, why are you reaching out for connection, Zach? Well, I was abandoned as a child. And so one of my traumas is that I continually seek love outside of myself to feel loved inside of myself. And I'll tell you right here and now, that never works, friends. The only place you're going to find that is within yourself. And nobody can give it to you. Only you can give it to yourself. And then there was my perfectionism. That was one of my intelligent, adaptive survival strategies. My perfectionism kept me safe and kept me in positions of love throughout my entire life. And that was, perfectionism is a safety mechanism to avoid criticism. So I do perfect, therefore I'm loved. Hyper independence. This was a big one for me. It's really to avoid disappointment. So I can do this. I used to call it Zach can. Like, Zach can do anything. You need this done? Oh, Zach could do it. That's too hard for most people. Well, Zach could do it. Most people don't know how to do that. Well, ask Zach. It's too far to make it? Ask Zach. Too short? Zach could handle it. Like, whatever it was, I could do it, and I could do it all on my own, and I didn't need anybody else to help me. I was really just avoiding disappointment, because I had been disappointed so many times before when I allowed my needs to be met by others. In other words, they weren't met. And so I figured the only way to get them was to do it myself. You know that phrase, if I can't get shit done right, you got to do it yourself. If you want shit done right, you got to do it yourself. Is that motive? And then there's my adaptation of the overachiever. Does more. And he's really just overachieving because it's a mechanism to earn worth. So I can feel worthy. So I can feel loved by the people around me, because I did it all. But people-pleasing, perfectionism, hyper-independence, overachieving, these are examples of some adaptations that I had that were survival strategies, just like my addiction, that allowed me to be able to be safe in that moment or that instant, or to provide safety or a feeling of safety. That's what's fascinating is most of the times it's not actually creating safety as far as objectively speaking. It's more of a fear, a false expectation appearing real. It's not even truth. It becomes our truth because we believe it, but it's not actually an accurate representation of reality. A lot of the times, my people pleasing or my perfectionism or my hyper independence or my overachieving, they didn't work all the time. Like they worked and they helped, so I'd use them, right? And then there were some times I tried to overachieve and it got me nowhere. So then I would try the perfectionism or the people pleasing. I'd do all these things and it didn't work. So my strategy then began to become escape. So it's fight, flight, freeze. We'll talk more about those. But essentially, if trying to work it out through those strategies wasn't successful, then I had to go to the next strategy, major strategy of the human nervous system, which is escape. And escape sometimes look like physically running away, like running away from the lion. Sometimes escape looks like burying an emotion deep down and not talking about it. Sometimes escape looks like taking a nap and just trying to forget about it. Or sometimes escape is, you go do a heavy load of exercise to conditioned stress versus unconditioned stress. Sometimes there's other tools that could help you to escape this pain or this wound so that you don't have to deal with it in the moment. And if you're like me and you were prescribed or came across your path in one way or one way or another, then if it was a painkiller and you took it, it did what it's supposed to and it took away your pain. And if you were in a lot of pain when you took a painkiller, it felt like liquid gold. And if you weren't in any pain when you took a painkiller, it made you throw up. And the difference is because one system was dysregulated and needed that, and the other system did not. I also have learned to accept my pain for what it is. That's a big part of the recovery process, is learning to accept. Right now, you're learning to accept how you actually function. You got to learn how to accept what's really going on, accept that a part of you needs your support, and accept that only you can support that part of yourself. There's an acceptance that it's not serving you to continue to look down upon yourself or to talk negatively or to beat yourself up. I want to share a story with you. When I think of the ultimate, before I share that story, I want to talk about what I think the ultimate adaptive or the ultimate transformation in nature is. And when we recover, it's a transformation. It's a spiritual transformation, if I'm just going to be really honest with you. Why? Recovery is a spiritual process. Why? Because you are a spirit being having a human experience. Therefore, you are but spirit. And therefore, you are spiritual. And if you have disconnected from a part of yourself and you are looking to recover, which means now reconnect with that part of yourself you separated from, that is disconnected spirit connecting back to spirit. It's just a spiritual process. And gosh, I remember when I started mine, I was so confused. First of all, spirituality and religion, those can be easily confused in today's society and culture, and it took me a while to get through that. And I went through all the religions and did all that as well. But I'm here to tell you that spirituality has nothing to do with religion, other than one tries to control the other. But I am not religious, I'm spiritual. And at the end of the day, at the core of my beliefs is that, we do talk about soul contracts and why I'm here. And I think that why I'm here is to learn a lesson so that I could give it back, so I can give it to other people and grow and help this place being Earth. So I am under the impression that I'm going to come down here and I'm going to go through some things, kind of like a chrysalis or a fire. And I'm going to carve out some things so that I can then turn and give that back to other people. But we're spirit beings having a human experience, and recovery is a spiritual process. And whenever I think of like the transformation in nature that best mirrors the transformation of an individual recovering from addictions, and to me, it's the caterpillar and the butterfly. It's when the caterpillar transitions into the butterfly and he's able to fly away and be more than he's ever been able to be in his life. And in my heart of hearts, I think this is so true. I think this is where we are, where you're at with yourself and what opportunity that you have for yourself. Is that like the caterpillar, you may feel really low to the ground. You may feel incapable and want something more for yourself. But it's going to take a pretty big transition. It's going to take a pretty big change. I want to tell you a story about my mom. Well, sorry, my stepmom. I called her my mom forever because that's all I knew. Again, I was abandoned as a child, so I got to blessingly recently. So I've been able to meet my birth mother, my biological mother, which has been amazing, and we're building a relationship, and that's a whole nother podcast episode. But for today, I want to tell you that about Marianne. And Marianne was my stepmother. Growing up, she was what I considered to be my mother. She was an amazing, beautiful, loving, caring individual. And she did a lot for me. She was one of my greatest teachers. And why she was one of my greatest teachers is because she taught me so much. There's a lot of ways to learn lessons in life. And I think that the way that she chose to give me lessons was different than most of my teachers. But nevertheless, you can't deny what I've learned from her. I just can't. So Marianne, this loving, beautiful, and amazing woman was addicted to alcohol and prescription drugs. And it got a hold of her, like it does most, because it was the only strategy that she knew, conscious or subconscious. And she grew up in a family where alcohol was served at the dinner table when you were 10 years old. So whereas I grew up and I had to finish my milk before I could leave the dinner table, she had to finish her glass of wine. So Catholic, religious, just the family she grew up in. And so you can imagine with that kind of a lifestyle, by the time she was in her mid-20s, she was a full-blown alcoholic. By the time she's in her 30s, alcoholism is more than a way of life. It's the only way she can sustain life. And by the time she's in her mid-30s, she's attempting suicide, and our family is divorcing. And she's moving out of the house. And this has crushed me. Absolutely crushed me. She's not my birth mother, but I didn't know this. In all the essence of things, you have to understand she was my mom in my mind. That's all I knew. I knew that I had a biological mother out there, but I hadn't even begun to cognize what that meant because my mom was here. And this was the woman who was mom and who took care of me. And so whenever she attempted suicide and the family got it, well, first she attempted suicide, almost lost her job, several rehabs, several psychologists, all these things happen again. Long and short, she moves out. And the divorce is happening at this point. And she's in the throes of her alcoholism. And so there's a lot of trying to manipulate. It's not conscious. She's not trying to, but there's a lot of manipulation. There's a lot of controlling. And there's a lot of fighting that's going on between my dad and her. And I remember I didn't hear from her for a while. So I got the call. I would be the one that would have to call after like a couple days if I didn't hear from her because I knew that meant that she was going off on a binge. And I didn't hear from her. So then I go show up. And when I walk in the door, I find her passed out. She's overdosed. And she's unconscious on the bed. I can't get a breath. I'm so scared. I don't know what's going on. Other than I think she's dead. Mind you, my dog that I grew up with, he's dead on the ground. There's piss, shit, everything everywhere. It's a scary scene. It's a sad scene. It's the saddest scene I've ever had to deal with, especially at that point in my life. And in that moment, I was crushed beyond my ability to express to you. I could not handle what I was seeing. It was too much. So in order for me to survive that moment, I gave meaning to this experience. And the meaning that I gave to it was that if someone that is this smart, I mean, she's the director of nursing, and like someone this intelligent that has this kind of capacity, this kind of love, and this family, how could all of that be thrown away for something like alcohol? Because even she'll tell me that it's not worth it, that I'm worth it. But what I experienced was that I wasn't, and the alcohol was. And what she experienced was essentially being driven subconsciously to it because it provided that safety within her. Now, this was, like I said, the hardest moment of my life up until that point. I said that if this substance has the power to do this to something that I love and care about that much, then I, in all my power and strength, will figure out how and why. And that's when I started, guys. I had said no to drugs 1,000,000 times before. I had said no to alcohol 1,000,000 times before, and I had no problem saying no. I had no problems telling people that I didn't want anything to do with that cigarette or that drink or whatever it was. It wasn't me. I'm good. But in that moment, with my newfound meaning, my newfound purpose in life, all of a sudden, that bottle on the ground over there next to my, mother, it looks like if there's a lesson involved. Like there's something that I'm supposed to do with it now, that I'm going to be the one to figure it out. And in order to do that, I got to addict myself first. In that very moment, I made a decision. And I made a decision that affected the rest of my life, whether I knew it then or not. But the decision is that I'm going to figure out what it is that's so powerful about this alcohol and drugs that killed my family. And I'm going to do it by living it because that's all I know how to do. There's three things to learn anything. You can be told, you can do it, you can read about it, you can be told, or you can experience it yourself. I'll tell you right now, the most powerful way is the third way. That's where I learned is through experience. It's like if you're going to go learn how to skydive, right? Do you want to read a book about how to skydive and then go jump out of the plane? Or do you want to be told by someone who's already done it, like, hey, this is how you do it, blah, 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 blah. And then you're left to your own device to get up there and try based off what they told you? Or are you going to go up there and experience it and learn it for yourself by someone who's actually jumped out of the plane with you and jump out of the plane with them? It's going to be the third option. Because that's where you're going to learn the most. You can talk about it all day, but until you experience it, it's a whole nother thing. And so for me, I found, whether that was a subconscious drive or not, I didn't like to go to the school where you sat and you read or were told what to do. I liked to go to the school where you went and you experienced. I didn't realize that till 30 years later in life, but turns out that was my pattern. Anyways, I wanted to experience what it was. I knew in my heart that nothing could change me. Nothing had the power to affect me like it had the power to affect my mom. And I will take down this alcohol and I will take down these drugs until I understand and I can make sure that it doesn't happen to anybody else. Now, I picked up the bottle that was close by. There was 3 175s of vodka. She was consuming 3 175s a day plus like 60 Seroquel. It was astronomical. And so I just picked up the bottle of vodka and I left. And, coincidentally, there was a bunch of police officers in the apartment because, again, she was unconscious. They had an ambulance had to come. They had to resuscitate and revive her. Once they got a heartbeat and got her going, then they had to pump her full of charcoal and start the process of detoxification, and they're getting her in the ambulance and it's all sirens and scary, and there's like 10 police officers in there. My dog's dead. They're trying to pick up things, collect the environment, and the cops feel so bad for me. I remember I picked up one of the bottles and I just walked out, and I know they saw me. I know they did, but Springfield, Missouri wasn't a huge town, but it's kind of still got that small town vibe. And that cop, I know they looked at me, but they felt so bad for me that they let me go. And I don't know that that's the case, but I just walked out of that room, I'm telling you, with the 175 of vodka that my mom just overdosed on, and 4 officers were right there watching me leave. And I walked straight down and I got in a car, my truck. And I said, all right, here we go. Let's figure this out. And I turned that bottle back and I tip, 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 tip. And after 3 swigs, I put it down and I threw up. I said, you're not going to stop me. I'm a Zach. I fucking took it back again and threw up some more. And then I took it back again and threw up some more. And at this point, I'm just, now I'm drunk. It's only been 10 minutes. I'm sick drunk. I start driving. I pull out of the parking lot. I don't make it to the light outside of the parking lot. We're talking about like 25 feet, maybe. And one of the cops in the parking lot hits his sirens and he pulls me over. And he asks what I'm doing. He knows what I'm doing. It was one of the officers that was in the building, in the apartment. I said, well, I'm trying to figure this shit out. He said, this isn't the way to do it. I said, I'll show you. And I drove off. And long and short, I got 3 DUIs in that week because they wouldn't take the car. And I'm so head stubborn, strong, arrogant, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to figure this shit out. I just lost my mom. I'm not losing my dad or myself or anybody else. And nobody else needs to go through this shit like me. So fuck it. I'm figuring it out, officer. And so I'm not going to explain to him. I'm not here to teach him. I'm just here to do me. And so I keep trying to chug and go, and I get a DUI. I get sent to jail. I wake up the next morning and I walk all the way back to where the truck is. I get back in the truck. I go across the street to the gas station to get some more alcohol, and I try it all over again. I do this like 3 times. Really, I was in extreme pain and I was acting out in order to receive love. That was all subconscious at the time. Another subconscious thing that is hindsight's always 2020 is I know that I was nowadays, I know looking back on it that I was setting up my experiences to be what they needed to be in order for me to learn this lesson that I had come down here to learn. And the lesson ultimately was learned how to love myself. And so if I had a scenario or an experience that had been carved out that would force me to learn to love myself. And again, that's a soul contract that I'm talking about, but I had one. And so that's what I think it was. And I think that those DUIs put me in a place where I was not able to, well, one, drive. I lost my license for 20 years. Well, for 10 years. Statute of limitations was 10 on it. He took it for 10. 9 years in, a cop, I'm at 9 years in, so now I'm 1 year before, which means you can do like the breathalyzer and the GPS and the SR22 insurance and the check-ins and all that, but you can drive to and from work. And so I go to do that, or I'm doing that, and I pull out of my driveway of the house, and it was at night, and the officer said that I didn't have my light on in time, which I didn't, and I lost my license for another 10 years. Now, mind you, I was going to get crack. It was like 2 a.m. So yeah, he was also an angel or a guide helping me stay on my path. And he was parked right outside my house, waiting to make sure that I couldn't drive for another 10 years. And I bless that man today because I totaled so many cars and I probably wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case. In fact, I know I wouldn't. The last one I wrapped around a tree and totaled it, last car. So I will just say that that was a blessing, like all of my blessings in disguise. And it caused me to, again, be 20 years without a license. So now I can't, it's just setting up the stage for the type of life I'm going to have, which really is saying the type of challenges I'm going to endure that are going to make me who I am. So back to Marianne, I want you to know that I didn't want to do alcohol. I didn't want to drink alcohol ever in my life. But the moment, and why? Because I associated a pain to drinking was greater than the pain of not drinking. And the moment that I saw that if I drank and became addicted and could figure it out, then I could give it to my mom, people like my mom or my mom, and then it would save our family and I would have my love. We would all be a happy family together. And so the love is what drove me. It's what driving everybody. The desire of love is the reason that I no longer saw alcohol as a problem. And instead I saw it as the solution to relieve my pain. It was the solution to help my family, to figure this out so I could help my family. So now when I see alcohol as a solution to my pain versus being painful, all of a sudden alcohol for the first time started to look appealing. And all those other drugs, when I did them, by God, they work. And so it's like you work them, right? So next thing you know, I'm working them, but I don't know why or how they're working. And it leads me very quickly to a path where I forgot why I was even doing all of this. And there were moments that I would have where I remembered why I started. And I'd be humbled to remember why I started, because I would often be in a place where I was looking at death's door. And it was like a reminder that kept me going, but then would eventually just, the going kept me into a drug use that I forgot why I was going. And I mean, this went and went and went until I essentially had the experiences that Marianne had. I had to learn what it was like to try to take your own life. I had to learn what it was like to do all the drugs and to do all the alcohol and to take the depressant, to do it all. And for me, how I learn through experience is I try until I figure it out. And most of the times, how I figure it out is because I tried everything else that I thought it was, just to find out that it wasn't any of those things, and that it was something completely else, different. And that's kind of the story of my addiction, is I always thought that I was doing something different than everybody else. And I was doing it for love. I was doing it for my family. +20 years later, again, hindsight's 20/20, right? I was able to find the answers to my recovery at a root cause level. And what I found was that the reason I did what it is I didn't want to do was because I was seeking love or the removal of pain.